Macmillan Audio presents A Woman in Berlin by Anonymous, translated by Philip Bohm, read for you by Isabel Keating. Forward. It is perhaps no accident that an extraordinary work like A Woman in Berlin has had a history that is no less amazing. First published in 1953, the book disappeared from view, lingering in obscurity for decades before it slowly reemerged, was reissued, and then became an international phenomenon, a full half-century after it was written. The events described are also extraordinary. The author, a woman living in Berlin, took meticulous note of everything that happened to her as well as her neighbors and friends from late April to mid-June 1945, a time when Germany was defeated, Hitler committed suicide, and Berlin was occupied by the Red Army. While we cannot know whether the author kept the diary with eventual publication in mind, it's clear that the private scribblings she jotted down in 3 notebooks and on a few hastily added slips of paper served primarily to help her maintain a remnant of sanity in a world of havoc and moral breakdown. The earliest entries were literally notes from the underground, recorded in a basement where the author sought shelter from air raids, artillery fire, looters, and ultimately rape by the victorious Russians. With nothing but a pencil stub, writing by candlelight since Berlin had no electricity, she recorded her observations, which were at first severely limited by her confinement in the basement and the dearth of information. In the absence of newspapers, radio, and telephones, rumor was the sole source of news about the outside world. As a semblance of normalcy returned to the city, though, the author expanded her view and began reporting on the life of her building, then of her street, then on the forced labor she had to perform and her encounters in other neighborhoods. Beginning in July, when a more permanent order was restored, she was able to copy the contents of her 3 notebooks on a typewriter. In the process, words became sentences, allusions were clarified, loose sheets were incorporated where they belonged. The result was 121 pages of gray war-issue paper. These pages, authenticated along with the original notebooks by a foremost expert on 20th century diaries, stand as a shattering indictment and complete our record of the time. The author chose to remain anonymous for reasons that any reader can understand, and I feel bound to respect her wish, responsible as I am for the reissue of her text. What may be said, however, is that the woman who wrote this book was not an amateur, but an experienced journalist. In the diary, she alludes to several trips abroad as a reporter and to visiting the Soviet Union, where she picked up a basic knowledge of Russian. We may surmise that she worked for various periodicals after Hitler came to power, up until 1943 to 44. A number of magazines managed to avoid involvement in the propaganda demanded by Joseph Goebbels. It is likely that through her professional contacts, the author met Kurt W. Marek, a journalist and critic who facilitated publication of the diary. An editor at one of the first newspapers to appear in the new German state, he went on to work for Rowohlt, a major Hamburg publishing house. It was to Marek that the author entrusted her manuscript, agreeing to change the names of people in the book and eliminate certain revealing details. In 1954, Marek placed this version of the book with a publisher in the United States, where he had settled. Thus, A Woman in Berlin first appeared in English in an earlier translation, and then in 7 other languages. It took 5 more years for the German original to find a publisher, and even then the company, Helmut Kosodo, was not in Germany but in Switzerland. But German readers were obviously not ready to face some uncomfortable truths, and the book was met with either hostility or silence.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?